Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com with this week's episode of a Market Monday. I know it's not Monday, it's Tuesday. I was busy yesterday with a bunch of orders and other things going on that I didn't get to doing the Market Monday, but I thought that I had a good topic today for Market Tuesday, talking about Throne of Eldraine, as this set is about to be released upon us within a week, and it's always good to get ahead of the price either spikes or, in this case, the price crashes. Throne of Eldraine is coming out with just a crazy amount of value. It is a bit skewed here with the overall price of 527 due to the contents of Brawl decks. This, I think, was the set with the most cards that had been printed in it. When you have the Planeswalker decks, you have the Brawl deck, and just the regular releases like every other set has. This just has a ton of different cards that are contained in this particular set. So it's going to be skewed a bit due to this fact. However, we are starting to get a bit of information on what cards are selling, what cards are hot, and I think I'm just going to discuss that in today's Market Monday. So I'm not going to usually do like a top 10 list of cards that are either booms or bust. I need to study this a little bit more, look at the decks that people are brewing with, and then I'll get back to everyone with that, probably on my Rogue Market channel. However, it is kind of interesting to see the cards that are moving, and there always is some discrepancies between actual movement and people just kind of the feeling of the market. So one of my favorite, philosophers, economists, psychologist in history, his name is Daniel Kahneman. And Daniel Kahneman was able to help create some software, him and some colleagues, that actually gauged the stock market based on feeling rather than on fact. That so many, up to this point, people were putting all their trust in the cold hard data, and Kahneman proved that the market responded more to feeling than it did to fact, and they were able to make a killing off of creating software that just scanned the feeling of the market, the overall human feeling of what people thought the market was doing. And I think we see a lot of that in the Magic the Gathering community. There are terminologies like price memory that we talk about when a card holds an unjustified price just because people remember it being good or remember it being expensive. And the same can be said about this price hype, where people think a card is going to be better than it actually is, or the opposite with cards like Arclight Phoenix. The pros get out and say this card's going to be garbage, and so even though it starts to put up numbers, it takes even a little bit longer before people actually buy into it or adopt it, based on the perception of yesteryears of where people thought the card was bad or thought the card was inexpensive. So it's always good to look at those sort of aspects of the market before actually making any purchases, because eventually things will come to the data. Like the feeling does have that initial effect, but if these cards do not see play, or if they do end up seeing a lot of play, then the price eventually will go to where it should be. So that's where I focus on in Magic the Gathering. I've been able to get ahead on many cards due to this, because you just look at the discrepancy like, wow, this is in 4 decks of 4 of. How come it's $1 rare? Whereas this rare is a $5 rare, and it's only in 1 deck as a 2 of. So, there's something's got to give there. Of course, other factors, if it was in a pre-constructed deck or is a promo somewhere, those, of course, need to factor in. Typically, also, cards that are out of unpopular archetypes, even if they do quite well, won't be as expensive as something like in a control shell. It always tends to be the cards in control, usually blue and white cards or black and blue cards, to have a higher price tag than their counterparts, just because. And you can say the same with mono green. If it's used in a mono green deck, it'll usually will be worth more comparatively to the data than other decks that are in more color pairings and whatnot, or deck strategies that don't see as much play by the masses. All right, so let's look at Throne of Eldraine. We got the most expensive, if we look at the non cards that are coming out of the, I think actually this one is not. So we have Oko, Thief of Crowns, and we have Questing Beast, which is probably the most highly anticipated card, with all the buzz surrounding it, with Flying, Death Touch, or Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste. So 4/4/4, can't be blocked. Combat damage can't be prevented by creatures you control, and it can deal damage to a Planeswalker that player controls if it actually connects. So people are thinking this is going to be a very, very good card to still being able to dish off damage to the opponent and kill off a pesky Narset or Teferi. And I tend to agree. I think this is going to be a card that is going to see play in the various Celestia, mono green stompy decks. In Gruul looks pretty good, or the Abzan still looks pretty good for a 3-color pairing and so does just specifically Golgari or Jund, those type of shells, Sultai. They do seem to want like a 4/4 for 4 that has a lot going with it. The haste, death touch, and vigilance really make this card a very potent card to be able to play on defense, protecting your Nissas or whatever cards you have, whatever planeswalkers you have back on your line, and yeah, this is just the perfect card. The power level is just nuts for this card. So I do think the price is pretty reasonable for this. So it gives us a good baseline. So now we can compare every card to Questing Beast. The hype is there. I'm sure the numbers will actually agree with Questing Beast. It does have one competitor in its slot with the Flash Wolf, but I think that this is strictly better in most shells than the Flash Wolf unless you're going into a Flash type strategy. All right, so there's our Mythic set at a $20 price tag. If these cards are not as good, which I consider they are a lot more narrow than the Questing Beast, then these are the cards that I think have the most opportunity to go down. Typically, Planeswalkers do pre-sell for higher because everyone remembers Teferi, everyone remembers Jace the Mind Sculptor, and they think, oh wow, these cards have the sky's the limit for Planeswalkers. They can go up to $100 while in Standard. I never put that sort of faith in two-color commanders. So this green-blue Oko Thief of Crowns really has to have a lot of decks out the gate to justify the price tag. So creating a food token and having 6 loyalty is pretty good because then the next turn you can immediately exchange control of target artifact creature you control with a creature your opponent controls with power 3 or less, so you can get rid of your what is your the 0/3 that put a land into play, for example, and then swap it out for one of your opponent's better cards. That's always a gimmick that could be have, but I think this card is just too narrow at the moment. I'm not saying it's bad or anything. What I mean by narrow is just it has a certain place that it has to go in a particular deck. And these are the type of Planeswalkers I don't like, and therefore this one I think is going to be a card that goes down. The Brazen Borrower is another card that needs to prove itself. The ability to return non-land permanent opponent controls to its hand and then have a 3/1 creature that can only block creatures with flying. Both of these have the flash type ability because it's an instant speed. But when you compare it to something like Reflector Mage, I don't know if it's quite there. It takes both your turns to sort of get that ability out. Where this card definitely does shine is it already has a deck that it's going to slot into, which is very good right now in the format. If you've played in the kind of the future league on MTG Arena, you see blue-green flash everywhere. This is probably going to replace Unsummon in that list, and it's going to be an Unsummon that then gives you a win condition back. So Borrower also, I think, is where we can get this baseline that $20 mythics are the highs. If people are only willing for the Questing Beast and the Brazen Borrower, that these are the ones that are most likely to see play, then that's kind of the value of them. We have the Royal Scions, which again is one of those cards that's very, very weird. We don't know where it's going to fit. This might be the card that can make Phoenix actually work with the draw discard with a +1, but then you have to protect it. It's got 6 loyalty. Giving a creature +2/+0 first strike and trample is very good with the Phoenix. So this is another card, or with the Drake, that already fits in a shell. So the Royal Scions already fits in an established archetype, and it's around the $15 range for the Mythic. So this one is interesting, though. Phoenix decks, I think Phoenix decks are hurting because they don't have Chart of Course, and they don't have Tormenting Voice. However, they do have... they still do have the Arclight Phoenix can go that route, or the Drake that can make this sort of archetype work. So again, you can feel free to look down on some of these rares. Some of the rares are going for as much as the mythics. Usually I have no faith in a rare over $5 in a standard set unless it starts to see a ton of modern play. This one, Once Upon a Time, has had the most hype from modern, but I would rather wait to see the modern decks adopt these type of cards than pulling the trigger on cards like Once Upon a Time. It's more likely this goes down to something that even a rare that does see occasional play in modern, $5-6. We have cards like even Dreadhorde Arcanist that have really started hit playing Legacy and Modern. They have a hard time hitting above that $10 mark, and I'm sure Throne of Eldraine is going to have quite a bit of opening, being the first set of the new standard. It's the one that lasts the longest. It's the one that has the biggest time period in between the next set. So these typically the first sets get opened the most. So again, you can kind of go down these other rares and other hyped up rares as Murderous Rider with destroying a Planeswalker for 3 mana, and then a creature Planeswalker, and then bringing back a lifelink creature that then goes back in your library for rinse and repeats. possibly. These other mythics are very, very unproven at the moment, like a 6-mana Planeswalker. We know how well those go a lot of times. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good. So we'll have to wait and see if these do fit in their respected places. However, we do have this awesome data point in the fact of TCG Player that allows you to search by cards that are actually being purchased. So this is a tool, even if you don't shop by TCG Player, this is definitely a tool that I suggest everyone does from time to time. You can search it by different metrics, like you can look for only common cards, only standard cards. Can you do only standard? No, I don't think you can. I guess you could just put the sets from a particular one. So this one I've marked it down to Throne of Eldraine. So these are the cards that are actually selling the quickest according to TCG Players. Throne of Eldraine metrics. So the first one is Drown in the Loch. This is a card that I don't have the biggest faith on because I think it's just one of those awkward. I've played with cards like this in the past that seem to be off curve, meaning that you want to cast them to be hitting something of that particular value at that particular time. So Drown in the Loch states that you can counter target spell with converted mana cost less than or equal to the amount of cards in the opponent's graveyard. Equal to that converted mana cost. So it's going to be quite awkward on turn number 2 to counter something, and even turn number 3 to counter something, because it's just so off curve with this particular card. People are saying, well, you can mill. Yeah, good luck with that. So it might be good in certain situations, and the same thing with destroy target creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. Same thing. It's going to be very tough to kill that card on curve. So I think that this one is very overblown, overhyped. It definitely could see play. Tyrant's Choice is competing with it right now, which is a spell that is on curve. It is going to kill everything on turns 2 and 3 when you want to be casting Tyrant's Choice or Tyrant's Scorn, whatever the Tyrant card is called. Castle Garenbrig is an interesting one too. These lands are who knows how well they're going to be. They're kind of like these weird check lands, specifically just for forests or if they're basic land type, and it allows you to have it come into play untapped if you do control another forest, and they do have added abilities to them. People have said that, there's very little downside to these cards and a huge upside, and I tend to agree. Specifically, you just play like a 1 of or 2 of in most deck. What is this one? You can particularly add mana, so add 6 green mana to your mana pool to cast creatures. So it's basically tapping 4 mana. So you're tapping this and 3 other to ramp up into a 6-drop. And this one really will shine if we do have that perfect 6-drop. Right now we do have some decent 6-drops in the form of like the Voracious Hydra. That's probably the perfect time to be casting it. I'm trying to think of other things that come out on turn number 6 in like a green shell. Hydroid Krasis is probably pretty good to throw this into, 6 mana into it, so it pumps it up for an additional life and a card draw. So I do think this Castle Garenbrig is pretty good. The price point's fairly decent too for this card at the $2, $3 range, and it's selling pretty good at that price point. We go into the Bone Crusher Giant, which I think is one of the better cards out of the set. If we actually look at the Bone Crusher Giant, let's see here. It says damage can't be prevented for 2 mana for the stomp. So it gets rid of those Turbo Fog decks on instant speed Tomp and deals 2 damage to any target. So it's a shock, little overcosted shock. It then becomes a 4/3. When it becomes a targeted spell, it does 2 damage to that spell's controller. So a 4/3 back that if it is dealt with by a spell, so control-based decks, is at least going to get 2 more damage. So pretty decent little card there. We like these type of cards in these mono-red type strategies because they give your opponent just bad scenarios all around. It's just going to get its value for what it is. So again, this is another card that is selling pretty decently at this $3 price point. But you can see that this one is actually selling under the Castle Garenbrig and has a higher price tag. So you got to figure out, is this one undervalued or is this one overvalued, and try to figure where that sweet spot is to make a decision on which one to invest in. The Stone Coil Serpent is the one that is being sold the next, which I think is actually, I don't know. This one's kind of cool because it's another 0 cost spell that now can make some modern decks go crazy with what's it called, Fecundity. Whenever a creature dies, you get to draw a card, and so now we have the Ugin's Spirit. We also have like Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista and Stone Coil Serpent and even the Chamber one. You can make an entire deck now out of that. So if you have any card like an Impact Tremors or a Blood Artist type effect, these type of cards just kill themselves, draw a card through cards like Fecundity, and there are going to be some modern base decks that now have plenty of these to work with. So Stone Coil Serpent, for that reason, is probably going to have an initial higher price tag. This is also, it's just very unknown of how well this is going to do. It's got reach and trample and protection from multicolor, but in today's day and age, you're usually getting more per mana cost than just a 1/1. So if we compare it to the green one, for example, in a green base deck, in this one you get a 4/4 vigilance, trample, and for 4 mana compared to something that vigilance, death touch, and haste, and also have a bunch of other upsides to it. So again, this is a card that is versatile, can be slotted into many different decks because it is a colorless spell. It triggers off of artifacts. We get it. That sort of thing can be slotted in a lot of decks, but I'd like to see this one actually see play before I would really go crazy on it. People are talking about how this could go in Hardened Scales affinity. I'm not sure. I'm thinking Hangerback Walker, Walking Ballista is usually enough for those decks. You still have the Ravagers that you're not going to replace. And a card that does have trample, though, it does have protection multicolored. Yeah, maybe a little bit relevant versus like there are a few colored, multicolored spells that do destroy artifacts in Modern. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to get there. So here's like the big price discrepancy though that we're talking about. So we have the Bone Crusher Giant and the Castle Garenbrig that are just outselling the Murderous Rider. Yet Murderous Rider is like what, 4 or 5 times the price of those. And so I think this is the big one to go down. What people do say that it has going for it, it does hit that Night Tribal. They're expecting there will be some sort of Night Tribal. Zombies are still okay. Most of the Zombies Tribal, I believe, rotated out like Liliana. So I don't know if there's a point to Zombies. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm missing a card from one of the sets. But yeah, so Murderous Rider, having the Knight, having the ability to destroy instant speed. Is it Sorcerer or instant speed? Let's pull it up here. It is instant speed, okay. So it is an instant speed destroy a Planeswalker. It's pretty good. I mean, it's just strictly better than Murder. So I think people are banking on the known information with this card. But I think comparatively to other rares that are selling higher, this is a little bit overinflated. After that, we have an uncommon. We have another rare with the Emery Lurker of the Lock. Same thing. It's going for a lot more than other cards that are outselling it. And it is something that is... A lot of people are talking about how this is going to break Modern. I am going to wait and see, but I mean, this is a pretty hefty price tag for a legendary creature that may or may not see multiple copies in a particular Modern deck. We have the Wildborn Preserver, which goes in the Flash deck as well, so it's another Flash Reach. We have another non-human creature enters the battlefield under your control. You may pay X, where X you may pay, when you do pay X, put X plus 1 counters on the Preserver. So it's pretty good with the other flash cards to dump in extra mana. And again, this one's already slotted into the mix. We have an uncommon with Deafening Silence, where uncommon's $1. That's probably the cap, even if it is going to see a lot of sideboard play in Modern. Think cards like Field of Ruin that probably will see more play in a variety of different decks compared to Deafening Silence. And you can see that this is probably right on point. The Castle Vantress is not too far behind. Another one that just has Scry 2, but a very little downside for an island. So decks that are going to be more in the monocolored decks. I actually like this in like the Flash deck, for example. And it is getting value off of the like breeding pools because it's just trying to hit that island type. It also does hit off of the Mystic Sanctuary because it is a land island. So this is going to be a little bit easier for them to come into play tapped. And again, this is just a nice land that you can spend 4 mana to scry if you have nothing better to do. Very little downside, high upside. Going down in this page 2, and then we'll call it good, you can see another card that once upon a time is being outsold by all the cards above it, and it still has a higher price tag than it. This would be a card that I'd wait to come back down to earth before I invested in it, especially because it does have this thing called rare. Rarity is rare. Gilded Goose, another one that is being out. This is a card, though, I do think we'll see play because it curves pretty well for that one-time use to get out of 3 drops. So depending on how good the 3 drops are in the format for a Llanowar Elf type effect, and you got to think this is a more versatile because it can tap for any color, and if you can create some food tokens, you got that going for you as well. So we have the Torben Thane of Redfell that's actually selling pretty good. I don't know where this one's getting at for mono red, probably for the 4 mana for red. If a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2. So again, you can make your shocks and everything go crazy. It's going to be played. I guarantee this is going to be a popular commander. This is also going to be a popular card in many commander decks. We have Mirror Maid, another rare. Just a clone base effect. of any artifact or enchantment, EDH is going to scoop this up. If this card price point goes down low enough, this is definitely one you want to hit. And then we actually have our first like bulk rare, which actually looks pretty good as a buy. So if you see, this is the first one down the list, and it's still outselling most of the rares out of set. So you gain control of target creature with converted mana cost of 3 or less until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. So Claim of the Firstborn is, no, it's an uncommon. I thought this was a rare. So this one is actually selling pretty good, 25 cents. But yeah, uncommon. I don't know where this is actually going to fit in. So we do have some other ones. Again, this is the way I'd go. Kind of a short little Market Monday, but it's always good to kind of look down these lists. And if you do see, so for example, if this one was a bulk rare, and this happens all the time, end up being uncommon because I misread it. But if this was a rare, this would be your card to buy into because it has a discrepancy between. So the people that were pre-selling cards would have undervalued this and put it at a bulk rare price, and then it been being sold higher than the bulk rare, higher quantities than the bulk rare price dictates. So I do this all the time, especially with commander sets and things like that. You'll see one, go to EDH Rec and see it has 50% more play than the next card, and it's a bulk rare versus a card that's $2, and it's its first printing. That's always a good sign to pull the trigger. So this video has been helpful for the Market Tuesday for the Rogue deck builder. So keep your eye on these particular cards and how they're slotted into decks. And again, you want to use everything at your disposal, the known information on decks that it currently can go in, and if those decks are going to survive post-rotation, the overall feeling of the community, if things are being overhyped or overblown or underblown, that's also going to come into effect of the price of cards. And yeah, just again though, data is key for this particular topic, getting in on these rotation or new rotation formats and new sets. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.